Hello, everyone. Welcome to Legal Lunch and Learn, a weekly live show where we ask an expert your question on a legal topic. My name is Cindy. I am a staff attorney here at Maryland Legal Aid. The co-host of the show is our Director of Community Lawyer Initiative, Megan McDermott. And our topic today is mortgage forbearance and other stimulus reliefs. So our guest star attorney today is an expert on foreclosure and bankruptcy, Mr. William Steinwindle.
Hello, everybody.
Whom we affectionately call Bill. So if you do have questions about mortgage forbearance or any sort of stimulus relief today, please post your questions in the comment. If you want to remain anonymous, you can send us a direct or private message. Our production engineer, Ms. Alec Chase, is here today to screen your questions and make sure that they get to us. And of course, if you have an immediate legal issue, please contact us and we will post that information in the comment down below. For those who need the information read out loud, our email here is lawyer@mdlab.org. That's LAWYER@mdlab.org. Our phone number here is 443-451-2805. Of course, before we get started, just because you are taking some legal advice from us or receiving some legal information, it does not establish an attorney-client relationship between you or any of the attorneys here. And of course, it does not establish that relationship with Maryland Legal Aid either. So with that out of the way, let's talk to Bill. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Hello. How's it going?
So before we get started on our topic, could you tell us a little about your experience in this legal area?
Yes. I graduated from law school, Georgetown University Law Center, in May of 2010. I did work for a creditor for about 18 months, and then I was exposed to bankruptcy that way. After that, I went and worked at a small law firm in Silver Spring in 2012, handling bankruptcy and foreclosure matters. Um, since 2004, since December 2014, I've worked at the Maryland Legal Aid Bureau Foreclosure Legal Assistance Project. We've handled foreclosure cases and represented clients in bankruptcies that assist them with foreclosure, affirmative litigation, basically handling the entire foreclosure process from loan modification to bankruptcy to anything that could happen. I've done some sales and things like that. And also before that, when I was in law school, I worked as a research assistant for a professor that prepared the economic justice textbook that's used at most of the law schools. So that was right at the foreclosure crisis infancy. So I am one of the few people that's probably read the AIG agreement that the AIG formed with the government when they were basically placed into receivership. So I've been doing this a very long time at this point. Unfortunately, I've now seen two very unfortunate financial crises in my career, unfortunately.
Yep, I was going to say you're about to head into another crisis
Yes.
here. So tell us, just very briefly, if you could let our viewers know if they're a Maryland resident who is eligible for our free help, what kind of service will we be able to provide them?
So, if you are a Maryland resident or own property in Maryland, we do have some people that are getting assistance from relatives in Pennsylvania, but the relative owns property in Maryland. So, if it's either own property or live in Maryland, we can represent you at any stage of the foreclosure process. Even if you're 1 or 2 months behind, we can still provide you advice. And also, we're going to talk about the forbearance program, and that will be available to you. Or if you're, 10 to 12 months in default, and then there's a sale date approaching, we can represent you in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy if you're financially eligible for it, or other options. I mean, we can pretty much represent you in anything that happens along the foreclosure process. Even post-sale, there may be some options to get some money back, in regards to if the house sold for more than was owed, and we do represent people in that as well. So pretty much anything in regards to the home foreclosure process. Now, the only thing we don't do at Legal Aid is tenants in foreclosure. There aren't a lot of things that can be done, really. I mean, there is the 90-day rule. That's pretty much about all that exists, unfortunately. So we don't handle those cases, but really there isn't much that can be done, unfortunately, in those situations. But in regards to home foreclosure, we do represent people in both reverse mortgage foreclosures and standard 30-year mortgage foreclosures. So pretty much anyone we can assist if they're facing a foreclosure issue in this state.
Yep, that sounds great. And just to clarify, for the rest of the presentation, though, even if you're not a Maryland resident, this will still apply to you. And we'll let you know if it is a Maryland specific rule that we will be talking about. But in terms of mortgage forbearance, that's a nationwide thing. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, that is a nationwide available. And the moratoriums that we're going to talk about are to apply in the entire 50 states and territories of the United States. So.
Yep. So let's dive right into mortgage forbearance. So to begin with, what is it?
So basically, mortgage forbearance, the most important thing to remember about it, it is not a forgiveness. Now, it may evolve into a forgiveness, but at this point, it is not a forgiveness. It is basically a freeze on your mortgage payments. That's the best way to explain it. So basically, if you're facing a hardship caused by the current economic crisis, COVID, or the COVID situation directly or indirectly, you can apply with your mortgage holder if this is a federally backed mortgage for a forbearance, basically a hold on your mortgage payments. Now, I do want to address a federally backed mortgage would be a mortgage that is insured by FHA, Fair Housing Administration, the Veterans Administration, the United States Department of Agriculture, or is underwritten by the government-sponsored entities of Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Also, all reverse mortgages fall into this category. However, reverse mortgages are not eligible for forbearance because you're not making a monthly payment on those types of mortgages. So a forbearance is basically for any non-reverse mortgage that is federally backed in which you're having difficulties making the payments. You can apply. All of the servicers that I have seen have online availability to apply. You can also call.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
I'm gonna slow you down there. So
Yeah.
before we get too far, our production engineer will put a list of the federally backed mortgage companies in our chat. So if you want to check it out, if you know who holds your mortgage, but before that, so do you mean that forbearance means that I don't have to pay my mortgage for a couple of months? How does that work?
That is correct. So basically, for a certain period, you are basically excused from making your mortgage payment, and they do not have to, and they're not allowed to go forward with a foreclosure or mortgage default, depending on the state you're in. Not going forward with the default process. They are prohibited from doing that. Now, that doesn't mean that it disappeared. But it does mean that you are not responsible for that particular month's mortgage payment.
When I'm not responsible for that, does the interest still accrue for that month?
No, they are not permitted to charge interest, penalties, or fees on that amount.
So it's like I'm putting a pause button on my mortgage payments for a couple
months. That is correct. Yeah. That is correct. It's basically like you're putting a pause, and then hopefully your economic situation improves at the end of the pause, and you can resume making the mortgage payment at the current rate that it is. That's the theory.
Well, how long do I get forbearance for if I apply?
So the law states, the CARES Act, just to be clear, that's the law we're speaking of. It is a provision of the CARES Act, which was the emergency economic assistance passed at the beginning of the COVID situation. I think it was March 27th, 2020. Don't quote me on that. Basically, what it says is you can apply so you can apply and you can get up to 6 months, which can be renewed for an additional 6 months thereafter. So basically, the total is about a year that you can get, but it starts in 6-month increments. So, and what we're seeing is more like 3-month increments. They get it, but then you can reapply, and they'll extend it for another 3 months, and they'll extend it for another 3 months. So the whole length is a year, but you may have to to show the continuing economic hardship at points during that period.
So let's be a little bit more specific, because you said, hardship or economic hardship due to COVID. Can you give some examples?
So it is either a direct or indirect hardship. So a direct hardship would be like, let's say you worked at a restaurant, and when the states shut down and online and in-person dining was either eliminated or severely reduced, you were laid off, and you don't have any income. That would be a direct cause. An indirect cause would be something like, let's say you weren't personally laid off, but your kids are now at home and you had to take fewer hours, and there's no then you're the only breadwinner in the home. Then that would be an indirect, because it wasn't directly caused by COVID. You still have a job, but because of COVID, you had to reduce the amount of income you brought in. As I said, and from what I've seen, the mortgage companies are interpreting this fairly broadly. So if I've even had cases where it's just a reduction in income. Hours were reduced, even in places like hospitals, where you would think maybe that wouldn't be the case, but there's certain departments where they don't have as many resources now because and not as many people are coming in because of COVID. Let's say you were the X-ray person or the MRI person, but now only 30% of the people whose schedule were coming in because they're worried about COVID. Then that would be a reduction in income that was indirectly caused by COVID. So as I said, it's being interpreted fairly broadly. You just have to show some connection to the current situation. I would say probably the people would be the hardest for is people on a fixed income. Because Social Security checks are still coming out. That's going to be a harder sell because nothing's really changed in that regard. But again, if there was another person in the house that was providing income that has lost it, then that would work as well.
Right. What sort of proof do you have to provide when you apply?
Generally, only a statement is required. Now, the statute says they can ask for pay stub A and pay stub B showing a reduction. But generally, if you provide a statement, they're usually not going any further. But some services, it depends on the servicer, but most of them, a written online or telephone conversation with a questionnaire is usually sufficient. But they can request financial information to support that decision.
So this sounds like a really good deal for those who are having problem making ends meet or need to prioritize another bill. That's maybe not necessarily the mortgage payment. So is there any downside to applying for the forbearance or
well, the one thing is that it is only for federally backed mortgages. So if your mortgage is privately held, which is about a third of the market, it's not going to fall into this. So you have to be careful. You can't just assume. That's why you have to reach out to your mortgage company and see what the response is. And even with private mortgages, we have seen some forbearance, but it's much more of a fluid situation. It may only be a month, it may only be 2 months, it may be 6 months, but then you have to pay the whole amount at the end. So, because they can do what they want, it's whatever they feel makes market sense to that. The other thing is that if you can pay your mortgage, it always helps because you never know. What if you're okay now, but then something happens in the winter and you lose your job or you lose income, and then the program doesn't exist anymore, and you're now behind. And that's never a good situation to be in. Remember, it doesn't disappear. It's still there. So you still have to be able to fix it. The other thing is that we don't know what's going to happen afterwards. Now, FHA has given us some idea of what they're planning on doing. Basically, things like deferred balances where they place at the end of the mortgage. You don't have to pay it right away. You're just start paying. But when in regards to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, we have very little guidance on what's going to happen the day after this is all over. So, you may get a modification, but you're probably going to, write the stand. Currently, you can only get one loan modification every 2 years generally. That's
wait, let me pause real quick. What's a loan modification?
So a loan modification is when if you've fallen behind on your mortgage and they restructure the whole loan, either extend the terms, lower the interest rate, change the payment, do a deferred balance. They basically change the terms of the loan to allow you to basically not have to pay the default all at once, to sort of spread it over time. But generally, you can only get one of those once every 2 years. That's sort of the market standard because that's FHA standard. So if you're in a Fannie Mae loan and you've already had one in the last year or two, and then you do the forbearance, you won't have any risk during the forbearance period. But what happens the day after? Nobody's really sure if they're going to sort of look the other way and just give loan modifications, do more deferred balances. No one's really sure. So it'd be better if you weren't in that situation to begin with, because as I said, in the winter of next year, I have a feeling that other people in my profession, that do this, we're going to be very busy because there's going to be a lot of people that are either A, confused, or B, in a bad situation because, they now are out of the deferral, out of the forbearance period, but the offer that they're getting from the mortgage company isn't something that they can afford. So
Yes,
it's always better to pay your mortgage if you can.
Yep,
but if
absolutely.
you can't, then take advantage of it. And the people it's the best for is the people, I think ultimately, and especially with what's FHA sort of drives the bus and everyone sort of follows. And the guidance they're giving us is if you were current before COVID and you fell behind because of COVID, you're going to be in the best situation after this is over. So if you're in that situation, you're probably in the best place where they'll work with you. But if you were already behind and then COVID made it worse, and you can somehow pay some of it down, you probably should, because it's more up in the air on what's actually going to happen for those.
So does it matter if it's, your second and third mortgage that we're talking about?
As long as they're government insured, there isn't a difference. But the one thing I will say is second HELOC, home equity lines of credit, which is generally what second mortgages are, generally aren't federally backed mortgages. They tend to be more privately held. So be very careful. You need to speak to your mortgage company immediately and make sure that that's a federally backed mortgage, because a lot of them are not.
And just to bring it back to the point, how can a person tell if their mortgage is federally backed?
So the best thing is to call your mortgage company or send them a request in writing. Fannie Mae does offer, like, if you have a loan number, you can check on Fannie Mae, but websites inherently aren't 100% accurate. It might give you a good idea. Looking at your deed of trust might give you a good idea, but again, it's not a guarantee. The best thing to do is call your mortgage company, contact your mortgage company in writing, and ask them, because that'll give you the answer for sure.
All right. So for those who, are interested in applying, I think you said something about applying online. Can you be more specific?
So if you go to, so the most important thing is to find out who your mortgage servicer is. And the easiest way to find that out is to look at your mortgage statement. It will say that they want the money. They're going to tell you who they are. When you see that, then you go to that company's website if you have court access. If you have computer access or smartphone access. If you don't, then you call the number that's on the mortgage statement. And then if you can go to the website, they will have every mortgage servicer I've seen has a special, if you face difficulty for COVID-19, you click on that, and then you follow the instructions to get to the point in which you can apply. If you call them, then you ask, and if you call the mortgage company, if you don't have computer access, the first question they will ask, and I call these companies on a daily basis, is if you have an issue with COVID-19, please press 1. And then you press that number and you follow the prompts until you get to a person or until you get to the end of the application. So that's how you apply. The one thing that's good about this is because they know that there were going to be a lot of calls and a lot of inquiry, they sort of prepared for it. So they followed that.
That's great. So what if I apply and it gets denied?
So if it gets denied, then what you need to do, and if you believe that you fall within the federally backed mortgage realm and that you should have been approved, then what you should do is you can go to the website of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, and you can file a complaint against your mortgage company based on the fact that they denied you for a COVID-19 forbearance. They are required by law to respond within 30 days and give you an answer. Now, that may not be an answer that's satisfactory, but they are required to provide an answer on why you were denied. You can also write what's called a notice of error. That's a little more complicated simply because you have to find the mailing address. Now, mortgage servicers are required by law to make the address easily acceptable on the website. But I do this for a living and do notice of error all the time. 90% of the time it's easy to find, but about 10% of the time it isn't. So CFPB is usually a better way to go about it because it's all online. You fill out the forms, you're done in 10 minutes, and it goes immediate, and it's required to go immediately to the mortgage servicer. But if you don't have computer access, you can do a notice of error. You may have to call the mortgage company to ask for the address, and then you can mail it. I always say certified mail, but especially in the times we live in now and the issues, it probably would be best to do it that way.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to foreclosure. And it is a big topic, but we only have a couple of minutes to talk about foreclosure. So I hear this thing called a moratorium. Can you tell us what it is?
So basically, when the COVID-19 crisis started in mid-March, the Housing and Urban Development put in a forbearance on all federally backed mortgages, which again is Veterans Administration, Federal Housing Administration, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans, and all reverse mortgages. Basically, put in a stay for 60 days, saying that during that entire 60-day period, no foreclosure could go forward. So if a foreclosure was already pending, it has to stop at that stage, whatever stage it was at. That was extended to August the 31st. And now it has been extended again until the end of the year, December 31st, 2020. This does not apply to multifamily property. So renters, do not listen to this. There is a small caveat for FHA mortgages in regards to multifamily property, but I would urge you to contact the law office like Maryland Legal Aid or the one in your state if you're a renter that's facing eviction, because there are much more limited moratoriums in regards to that. But in regards to single family homes, there is a moratorium on all federally backed mortgages, good through December 31st, and that's nationwide. They cannot proceed with a foreclosure. Wherever the foreclosure is now has to stop right there. So that's where we're at right now. And that is good through December 31st, 2020. And again, that is Veterans Administration, Fair Housing Administration, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan.
Do we have any guidance on what happens the day after the moratorium ends?
We really don't know. It could be extended again, although that seems a little unlikely. But it probably depends on where we're at in regards to COVID. You know, if there's a winter second surge or what have you, then it may be extended again. Depends on a lot of issues. So we don't know. Assuming it doesn't get extended again, what will probably happen is, now remember, these sort of run hand in hand with the forbearance. So if you're in a forbearance still, nothing's going to happen until the forbearance is over. Assuming the forbearance is over and the moratorium's lifted, then it really depends on which state you're in. You know, in Maryland, we have a process and they're going to resume that process wherever it was at. In other states, they have a different process. So it's wherever they're going to be able to resume wherever they were at, unless there's some state bar from that. I can't comment on other states, but in Maryland, there is a requirement that an affidavit be filed to basically say the person isn't eligible for forbearance. So they would have to do that before they could proceed. Other states may not have that requirement. I urge you to, after this is over, if there's still a foreclosure pending, for you to contact the legal services organization in your area.
So just because you have so much experience and worked through another housing crisis before, do you know if there's any cases that courts might prioritize in terms of foreclosure, or cases?
Well, right now it's going to be the privately held mortgages that are going, but the ones that I've seen, at least in Maryland, again, some states like Virginia and other states, they do not have a judicial process associated with foreclosure. So it's more of whenever they want to move forward. But in states where there's a judicial process, like Maryland, there is some judicial involvement. I think they're going to prioritize the cases that were sort of on their way through the system when COVID happened. And that's what we're seeing, like cases that were filed in 2019, 2018, that have been stopped for, a bankruptcy or another reason, a mediation or something. They're going to prioritize them first because they want to clean out sort of what they can clean out and then start. So I think the new cases are going to be very slow to sort of trickle in the cases that are in the judicial states. I think they're probably not going to become, especially when it comes to a federally backed mortgage, they're not going to become heavy until probably the spring of 2021. I think that's going to be, once they clean everything out that they have, then they'll sort of start with new stuff. But that's just a guess. Again, it could depend. Remember, a lot of these law firms are dealing with a lot of financial issues themselves. They want to keep staff employed. They want to keep things going.
Yep, absolutely. So let's, before we turn the questions over to Megan, just really quick about the other stimulus release that came out under the CARES Act. So I'm hearing from a lot of clients that they still haven't gotten their first stimulus relief check. Do you know why that might happen, or have you seen?
I fear that may have happened because they were claimed as a dependent on somebody else's tax return, which tends to be the most common reason why somebody who thinks they would be entitled to a stimulus not receiving it at this point. If that's the case, then the only way to really resolve it, and this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it does if you sort of follow it through, is you have to basically file a tax return for 2019. Because if you file a tax return for 2019, then the IRS is going to flag it because somebody else claimed you for 2019. So there's going to be both of you are going to get a letter from the IRS, hey, Social Security number A and Social Security number A are on two different tax returns. So who can claim you? And then you're going to have to go through the the IRS process of an audit. It'd probably be a desk audit. And then but if you win, then you're going to get your money back. Now, when that could take 6 months, that could take 3 months, but that's really the only way. Now, if there was another reason, if you lived alone and you can't really feel of any person that could have possibly done this, I would suggest you call the IRS. That's the only way you're going to know for sure, because that's
Y-
who's in charge of the program.
Yep.
But
So
more than likely, I would bet on the dependency issue as being the one that falls.
Yep. So I hear there's rumors about maybe another stimulus check. Can you talk about that?
So again, this is an apolitical discussion, but this is just the reality of the current situation. There has been discussion of an additional stimulus check. Uh, and it's sort of wrapped up in the negotiations of a larger economic package. Now, the good thing about the stimulus is that it is not generally disagreed upon between the parties involved. Both the Republicans and the Democrats, the executive branch and the legislative branch, tend to think there should be another stimulus. There is a little bit of a difference in the numbers. The Democrats want to give dependent number. They both parties agree because the last time college dependents, they didn't get anything. Like the parents didn't get anything, the dependents didn't get anything. They're going to eliminate that and give the parents the money. The difference is more about the amount. The Democrats want it to be 1,200. The Republicans want it to be 500, which is what it was the last time. But generally, there's a lot of agreement here. So if the other issues, aid the states, unemployment, other things are resolved, then this is likely going to be sort of icing on the cake. Now they also could separate it from the other package and pass it. The only thing I want to note is that this has to be passed through an act of Congress because of the amount of money we're speaking of. The other thing is that Congress generally tends to go into recess very early in October so that the members can campaign because the entire House of Representatives and a third of the Senate is up in November. So I only mention that because we're running out of just time. I mean, we probably have the 4 weeks in September, and that's probably the end of it. So hopefully they'll pass something. I think people could use the money, especially as we approach the holiday season, but it is currently wrapped up in negotiations with other issues that are more contentious, so we'll just have to see.
Yep. And I think another common question that we do get sometimes is for those who did receive a stimulus check earlier in April, do they have to report it as part of the income for
They're
next year?
supposed to. The good thing is that it appears they probably won't have to pay it as taxable income, but they will have to do an additional form to reconcile. It'll be reconciled as part of your taxes next year. It'll be an additional line on the 2020 tax form. That's how it appears to be. Again, it's not 100% clear, but it looks like there will not be additional taxes owed. And also, for those of you who thought you should get one and didn't get one, that may be a way to get it back if there's a reconciliation next tax season.
That sounds great. So that's all the questions we have prepared, excuse me. Let's turn back to Megan for some questions from the audience.
Thanks, Cindy. Hi again, Bill.
Hello, how's it going?
Hey, so you mentioned a couple different kinds of mortgages that qualify potentially for forbearance. So I know legally we have a lot of clients that are veterans, and in fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going to do an entire session on veterans benefits. So for our veterans who might be watching, is there any difference in their mortgages from these other types of mortgages, or is it all kind of the same?
I mean, as long as it's through VA, if it's a Veterans Affairs and mortgage, then it is federally backed and governed by everything that we just discussed. Now, if you got a private mortgage that wasn't backed by the federal government, then there's going to be, then you're not governed by you're not protected by the statute. The good thing about the Department of Veterans Affairs is that they generally note on their deeds of trust if they are the underlying insurer of the loan. So if you go back to your original deed documents, you should know. And the good thing about VAs, they tend not to, they may sell them to a servicer, but it doesn't change it never goes from VA to non-VA. Well, FHA can go from FHA to non-FHA, and Fannie Mae can go from Fannie Mae to non. VA never does that. If it's a VA loan, it will stay as a VA loan. I've never seen a VA loan change from a VA. So usually if your original documents say it's a VA loan, it is still a VA loan. It's still owned by the Department of Veterans Affairs. So that may be the only difference, that once you're in the VA system, you're not really removed.
Okay.
You should be eligible for all the benefits we just discussed.
Okay, great. And then another question that we get a lot, usually around some other consumer issues, but I think will come up now with more people perhaps exercising this right to take a forbearance. Does forbearance hurt people's credit?
the law specifies that it shouldn't cause a credit damage. It's been a couple of months since I read the law, but I remember they specifically stated that it's no penalties, no credit damage. But if you feel that your credit was adversely affected incorrectly, you can reach out. You can reach out to. You can write a letter to the credit bureaus and say that, hey, this is a forbearance. CARES Act says I'm not supposed to be punished for it. Please reward. I think I was punished for it, and they're supposed to fix it. But the law states it shouldn't cause credit damage. But so that's what it is. I mean, it's not supposed to.
Okay, and is that because is that a protection built into the CARES Act that
Yes.
it's not supposed to harm your credit? Okay.
Yes, same thing with no penalties, no interest.
Okay.
Same. And it's also true, by the way, that's not the topic of this conference. It's also true for student loans as well, that it's supposed to not be held against you if you're in a forbearance of not having to pay as well. Same, no penalties, no credit damage, no interest accruing. So.
Okay, great. And then what about people, so they've applied for a forbearance because they can't pay their entire mortgage payment, but say they have a forbearance for a couple of months and then they start working again, so they still can't afford their full payment. Does it help at all to do a partial payment during forbearance? Is that an option, or do you have to wait till the forbearance runs and pay the full amount?
One of the best things about the forbearance program, which is not true of some other forgiveness programs that have existed in the past, is you are not penalized if you pay. So if you can pay anything, it's helpful. If you can pay the full amount, if you can pay partial amount, because eventually this is going to end. And you're going to have an amount that either needs to be placed at the end of the mortgage or needs to be brought into a loan modification. Something needs to be done with it. So if that number is lower, the lower the number, the easier it is for the mortgage company not to make you have to pay a lot up front. So just think about it that way, or have to restructure the whole loan. The smaller it is, the easier they can just sort of park it at the end of the mortgage. So the smaller that number is, the better it will be for you. So if you can send anything, it's going to be positive and it's going to be applied to the loan. So.
Okay.
And the good thing, again, interest doesn't and penalties don't accrue. So it is basically a principal payment, whatever it is. So that's also good as well.
Okay, so sort of along those lines, and I know you're a lawyer, not a financial planner, Bill, but I think a lot of people are trying to figure out which bills they should prioritize right now. So they have a mortgage. Of course, they also have to pay for utility bills, things like water, electric, internet, things like that. Maybe they have car payments. So do you have any opinion about which bills folks should be prioritizing?
So in a chapter 13 bankruptcy, I have to work with a lot of my clients in regards to budgeting, and I always go roof, lights, car, everything else. So first thing is make sure you have a roof over your head. Now, if you can get a forbearance, then that's great. But if you can't, pay the mortgage, pay your rent. Second thing is utilities, lights, water, electric, gas, what have you, to keep every phone. You have to communicate, even if you're, like me, not a big phone person. You still need it for emergencies. You need to have your electric so you can eat, so you have food in the house. So, and you need water. You need to, shower. Have water available to drink and things like that. So those are the two most important. They should come before anything else. Now, if you do have to still drive for work, if you're still going to a physical location, and there are a lot of our clients that still are, then you need to have a car. You need to have the transportation expenses. If you use the light rail, if you use the train, if you use the bus, if you use the car, you got to have the money. And if it's a car, you need to also have insurance. So that comes next. And then the last thing is everything else. And I always say, when it comes to everything else, put things in place that you're going to need first. So like, everyone needs to eat, so that comes next. If you have kids in school, that should probably come after that. Kids, that should be a person priority. And then when you get down the road, then it's things like credit cards and things like that. You don't want to fall too far behind, but remember, if you're going to fall behind on something, a credit card's usually the best thing to do it on. The one caveat I have for that is if you're with a credit union, which some of our clients are, and a lot of lower income people are, you may want to pay that, sort of after you get past, the essentials, the food, the roof, the utilities and what have you, simply because you want to keep that relationship going. It's better to be banked than unbanked. And those are the best banks to be involved in, and you don't want to lose that relationship. So that's sort of all the sort of unsecured creditors, I would put them at the top. Also, student loans, you can kind of put them at the bottom right now. There really isn't any incentive at this point, because you're not getting punished with interest, you're not getting punished with penalties. There's no real, if you have student loans right now, normally I'd put them closer to the top after the essentials, but right now I can sort of slide them all the way to the bottom because there's really no penalty for sort of taking a break from them, because they're not going to punish you. You're not going to, it's just basically a freeze, and at the end of the year, then you can reassess. But that's sort of where I would order it. Again, it may, every person's different, but the big thing is some people put credit cards closer to the top, and I think, and it's because honestly, credit card companies are the best at calling you all the time, but really they're near the back. Like, you pay, a minimum payment, they're not going to really do anything. So, so that's how I would do it. Again, roof, utilities, car, food, those are the most important things.
Okay,
healthcare,
really,
also healthcare, if you're paying healthcare out of pocket.
Sure. I think that's really helpful. I think people
yeah.
are very intimidated by credit card companies. They are sort of loud. So that's helpful to know. You mentioned cars. So I know I have a lot of clients when sort of prior to COVID, they were between jobs, they were trying to find work. They often would start driving for Lyft or Uber or one of those services. Do you have any idea if those types of jobs are still available to sort of bridge the income gap, or do you have other recommendations for jobs that folks could be looking for right now to kind of fill in those gaps?
So before I answer this question, I want to give a giant disclaimer. I am a fourth generation union family. I have a lot of issues on a personal level with some of how these companies do business, but at the same time, you have to survive. So I'm not condoning, I just want to be clear, I am not condoning any of these businesses. Believe me, I have a lot of issues with the way they handle it. But right now, you got to eat, you got to survive. And the best ones to do, to preserve both your safety and that are available for quick cash are like DoorDash, Instacart. What's the other DoorDash one? It's the same thing. Uber Eats, the food delivery and the grocery delivery services, because you're not interacting a lot with people. You just drop it off at the porch, leave. But at the same time, you're getting solid income, and you can do it as if you're working somewhere else and making a larger income, that may be a way to sort of bridge the gap, until the end of this and get some income. And as long as you don't make a large amount of income, you're not going to face large tax consequences. If it was your only job and you're making $30,000 a year, then you have major tax consequences in regards to being an independent contractor. However, if you're only making like, a couple thousand and you're earning like 10 or 12 at another job where they're withholding taxes, tax consequences are probably going to, even themselves out. The other one is that I'd look into is sort of anything related to sort of like construction and manufacturing and delivery, with like a Lowe's or Home Depot. Because again, person-to-person contact pretty limited, and all of a sudden there's a big need because all these people are redoing things in their home and things like that. A lot of these companies are hiring, and maybe something to look into. And then you don't get the downside of being an independent contractor and things like that. You are an employee, even a part-time one, and those companies may be something to look into. I mean, there are other places that are hiring, like grocery stores, but then you take on the risk of the COVID exposure. But they are, of course, hiring, and if you're a stock person, works mostly at night, your person-to-person contact would be pretty limited. But those are the sort of companies to look into. Uber and stuff like that. I mean, not a lot of people are going for rides anymore, so it's probably not as lucrative. I would probably look more at DoorDash, Uber Eats kind of thing, or Instacart. And I'm sure there's others, but those are the ones that I'm the most familiar with.
I think Grubhub is the other one.
Grubhub, yes, thank you. I knew I'd used them, but I didn't know.
It just came to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Well, that makes sense. I mean, whenever I go to Home Depot now, I know there's a huge line. So people are definitely in there and working on home improvement and yard projects. So that's good to know. I think that's all the questions that I have. So we'll turn it back over to Cindy to wrap up.
Thank you, Megan. So Bill, we're at the end of our show, and for our viewers out there, what do you think is the most important thing that you would like our viewers to know about mortgage forbearance or really any of the stimulus relief?
So I think the most important thing is to use it if you need it, but don't use it if you don't need it. That's what I always give my advice to all of my clients. Because there's also, we didn't get into this and it's very technical, but there's also relief built in if you're in a bankruptcy plan where they can extend it if you've hit a rough patch because of COVID. But I tell my clients, use it if you need it, don't use it if you don't need it. It's there if you need it, but if you don't need it, don't put yourself behind the 8 ball. It may be, a lot of people like to think of the instant, well, now I'm not paying my mortgage, I can, buy my kids a nice thing at Christmas, which is understandable. But remember, that day's going to end and you're still going to have a mortgage payment. So again, if you need it desperately and you don't want to lose your home, that's why it's there. But if you don't need it, or if you just need it somewhat and you can pay some, then do it, then pay it. But that's the most important thing. If you need the relief, use it, but don't abuse it. That's what I would say.
Very wise words. Very wise words indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming in today. So next week, I will be talking with our wills and estate expert, Charlotte Ahern. She's going to not be happy that I messed up her last name there. To answer your questions about wills, advance directives, and power of attorney. So our viewers, if you do have questions about any of those documents, make sure you either comment down below with your question or email us or private message us. And remember to share this video if you find it helpful. And of course, we do upload these videos to YouTube for those who do need closed captions. So just find us on YouTube and you can watch the videos there. And of course, remember to share if you find us helpful and tune in next Tuesday at noon. Thank you. Have a good rest of the week.